be okay. I'm Ray Bonney, a qualified counsellor, workplace mental health specialist, not to mention a very dedicated and oftentimes enthusiastically disruptive men's issues advocate. Not every girl's dream job, but hey, remember, men also matter. With you for the next hour before the divine Ken Lyons' His Health program, I'm unwrapping, as I always do on a Monday between 12 and 1, the greatest gift going around, and that is people. Layer by layer, we explore the thoughts, experiences, achievements and challenges of ordinary people bound to inspire the best you, at the same time acknowledging that it really is okay to not be okay. So turn up your radio. The time is just 5 minutes past 12. We just heard Steve-O's box of chocolates, a great selection as always. Steve-O never fails to give me a bit of a chuckle. Now, something else that never fails to astound me, and that is, of every minute of every day, another man kills himself somewhere in the world. And at the same time, at least another 20 are trying. And there does not appear to be much of a call to action, and all the fundraising in the world doesn't make much of a difference in reducing these astronomical statistics. There are, thankfully, many insightful, generous and motivated people doing incredible work in helping support, highlight and recognise that it really is okay to not be okay. My guest today, Jake Edwards, is a fourth-generation AFL player who describes one of his proudest moments in life as running out onto the MCG in front of 80,000 people. In the same breath, he illustrates the lowest point, facing a bathroom mirror, contemplating how to end his life. Now, 7 years later, in 2015, Jake pulled out all the stops and created a welfare and education program for Australian sporting clubs called Outside the Locker Room, which in almost 4 years has become one of the most sought after and well recognised programs, being used by more than 100 grassroots sporting clubs and schools across Australia. Jake's with me right now in the studios at 3WBC. Welcome to the show, Jake.
Thanks for having me, Ray.
It's an absolute pleasure. Now, we're brand new friends, really, aren't we?
Yeah.
I think we've known for each other for less than a week.
Yeah, twice in 1 week now.
Twice in 1 week. Now, we were introduced by the lovely Peter Attard, who is organising this year's NDIS Mental Health Conference here in Victoria, of which we've both been asked.
Yeah, we have. It's an exciting initiative that obviously NDIS have put together, and looking forward to getting there on the day and speaking about not only the work that we've been doing in the community, but bringing some massive awareness to some of the evidence-based data that we've been able to collect over the last couple of years, especially local grassroots community sport, and a lot of those stats involving young men that are playing sport with the mental health challenges that they're going through.
And you were one of those men.
I was, yes. As you mentioned earlier, football was a big part of my life. You're growing up in a small little farm in between kind of Bacchus Marsh and Geelong. I can remember being out in the paddock one day. My father, who played over 100 games, VFL, AFL football, and with star post in the ground and PVC pipe over the top, acting as goalpost, actually, to my father.
Sounds very dangerous, actually. Star pickets.
A little bit, yeah. But my father's a plumber, so we have plenty of PVC pipe hanging around and star posts being on the farm. So, look, if I was to give blood tomorrow, there'd be little footies floating around, and it's a big part of who I am, and I'm very proud of that. The pedigree that you mentioned earlier.
Mm. No, I think, just even in that piece that I read out in the introduction that, there are so many people, we talk about mental health as if it's a disability, but our health is our health, physically and mentally. But, where all this started, and we're going to talk about your amazing organisation Outside the Locker Room all the way through this. Mm-hmm. But what got you there in the first place? It's quite a dramatic story around when you were 19 years old.
Yep.
And you'd been picked to play with Carlton. Yeah,
so it was about 4 weeks out of year 12, actually. So I was only very young, and I was about 77 kilos, and football would be my dream career and my dream job ever since I can remember. And 4 weeks out of year 12, the national draft is on, and my name gets called out at pick 36 for the Carlton Football Club as a 17-year-old. So
what was that like, that moment?
Oh, look, it was riveting. It was certainly a massive achievement, something I'll never forget. I was actually down at Ocean Grove. Family's got a house down there, and My name hadn't been called out early on in the draft. And being a bottom age player, I still had another year, the following year, to get drafted. So when my name hadn't been called out, I thought, you know what, I'll come back next year and I'll train harder over the preseason and I can get drafted next year. So I'm not concerned if I don't get picked up or not. So I jumped in the car with my brothers and a mate of mine and went to play golf. And got halfway down the road and mum calls me and my phone, obviously, and, you know, yelling and screaming, you've been drafted. And it was just a moment that was very, very cherishable with my family.
Yeah.
Just being able to extend that family name as the fifth player in my family to play AFL, VFL football, and, you know, to see the look on my father's face for the first time when I'd seen him when I did a U-turn and drove back to the house. And, it was a great time. It certainly was. And I remember the following Monday, so that draft was on the Saturday, and that very next Monday coming up back at the Carlton Football Club was just being thrown into the deep end, straight into it. You know,
you didn't barrack for Carlton?
I didn't. No, I grew up barracking for Collingwood, so I just got drafted to the enemy. So growing up,
so it doesn't get more adverse than that, does it?
No, it doesn't. My father played for Collingwood as well,
Yes.
Alan Butch Edwards, and he played the 1979 Grand Final, which is the famous one with Wayne Harms.
Yes.
Was pretty much in the stands as he punched the ball in from the pocket.
Yeah.
And it's actually quite funny because when you get to a football club, you get given a number, and that's your number for your career. And it so happened to be that Carlton give me number 37, which happened to be Wayne Harms's number.
Wow.
Which I thought was quite funny. My poor father obviously got it rubbed in one more time. But, you know, I think any young person coming through the system would always say that I'm happy to go anywhere. I'll play football on the moon. It doesn't bother me where I go. And I had the mindset that, you know, I was happy to play anywhere, get the opportunity. And I actually never spoken to Carlton Footy Club right up until that moment my name had been called out. So I had no idea that I was even on their radar. I'd spoken to a couple other clubs. Melbourne Football Club are really keen, Fremantle, Sydney. And I thought maybe with one of those clubs. So Carlton was just as much a surprise to me as anyone else in my family. And it was kind of going from a big fish in a small pond straight into a very, very tiny goldfish hanging around.
A minnow.
Oh, yeah, big time. So I'm walking around the club rooms now with people like Anthony Koutafidis and, you know, Favola and all these guys that I've grown up watching play football, idolising who they are. So my footy career was exciting. It was fun. In the first couple of years, it was about earning the respect and finding that mateship within the group and getting that validation from everyone that you're a hard worker and you deserve to be there. And one of the things that I didn't expect to come along with my AFL career was we all have that external expectation and that verbalisation from people who like to have their opinions at times. And as incredible as that pedigree of my last name is, what brought with that was some people who I'd never met ever in my life, but their opinions were conflicting with my own, and things like, you know, you're not really that good of a player and you're only playing football, or you only got drafted because of your last name, and just a lot of things like that. There's a 17, 18-year-old male trying to, forge his way into an industry. It's all about, you know, ego and pride and all these type of things. But yet again, I was challenged with this verbal exception that, maybe these people are right. Like, maybe I don't deserve
it starts
to be here.
Interacting with your own self-esteem.
It does, absolutely. And it's something.
Can I just backtrack just a little tiny bit? Did you just ditch your VCE? Like,
no. I finished year 12.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, but only really just to get through to play football. I enjoyed school. I was never a bad student. I was always good to everyone, and I was the kind of student that got along with everyone. Yes. You know, especially playing footy, you tend to meet a lot of people, have a lot of good friends, and so forth. I never got in a lot of trouble at school.
Yeah, so you've gone from that really safe school environment where you're probably really well accepted, and, you know, year 12 students are, you know, king of the school, as you said, then to go into this environment which is very unknown to you, but also having part of that being judged. Yeah,
certainly. I think there's certain aspects of that you can't control. And I was learning that as a 17 and 18-year-old male, because when I had people saying things like that, it would frustrate me, it would anger me. And I allowed it to get to me. And for the first couple of years of my career, I thought I had to prove a lot of people wrong. So I kind of went into my career with a bit of a chip on my shoulder that I deserve to be here. I need to prove to everyone that I do deserve to be.
What did that look like in terms of your attitude?
Yeah, attitude was really cutthroat. It was really all about working hard and work ethic, and boxing became a part of my personality, I guess. I used boxing as a way for my teammates to think that I'm a really hard worker, and I'm quite physical and strong, and it just became something almost like I used it as a facade in a lot of ways, for my teammates to feel, oh yeah, this kid's serious, he wants to play footy and so forth, and have that reputable expectation that I'm hard. So you use the word facade.
How difficult was that to maintain?
Yeah, look, it was, because I think at some point it just got to certain lengths where at the end of my second year as an AFL footballer, I had...
Because you still hadn't played a senior game.
I hadn't played a senior game at this point in time, no. I had a couple of little injuries along the way, but just like any young AFL player, I was very keen on playing my debut game, and every week I'd be in there, the coaches asking why I'm not playing and so forth. And at the back end of my second year as an AFL player, Brett Ratton had taken over from Dennis Pagan, and that was when Rats had come to me one day during the week and said to me, Jake, just get through this week. You're going to make your debut the following week and play the last 4 games of the year, because we want to see where you're at and give you a taste of AFL football, do a strong pre-season and come back, and hopefully you're better for it. And I was so excited. I couldn't believe it. And I remember calling Mum and speaking to the family and saying, I just got to get through this week, and I'll make my debut next week. And I was really, really excited, as any young man would be, and any other. I went out that weekend, and the first quarter of that game in the VFL, I dislocated my ankle, which unfortunately meant that I couldn't play for the rest of the year and had to go into rehab. And I just remember I get asked a question all the time around the foundation, and obviously around the catalyst moment for me when symptomatically mental health, really the illness took control of who I was as a person, and certainly collapsed my identity as to where I was at. And that for me was a catalyst moment where I feel that you spend time in rehab as isolating. I was really bummed and down about the fact that I lost that opportunity to play my first senior game. And
was anyone taking care of how you were feeling about things then?
Not specifically, no. Certainly taking care of my injury,
yes,
as a rehab point of view, and that's what elite sport do really, really well. There's the resources from physio right through to doctors and so forth that can support that process. But this is over 10 years ago now, and the word depression I'd never heard of, and I had no idea.
And you'd had no feelings of depression before that?
No, not to the point to where it kind of escalated over the next 6 to 12 months.
Yes, I
kind of felt like I was tired at times and kind of felt on edge, probably the 6 or so months leading up to that moment, but I never identified it with being a physical issue, and especially not an emotional issue. I just thought it was just what it's like to be playing AFL footy. I thought, well, it's high pressure. This is stress and anxiety.
Or not playing AFL footy because you're
the expectation.
in rehab.
And a lot of people you talk to who are playing AFL football, it's not necessarily the training and game day stuff that's the issue. It's more the away from the club stuff, the anxiety, the expectation, the stress, the I guess the relationship, the impact it has on relationships at home, such as girlfriends and partners and that. And
how was that playing out for you at the time?
Yeah, it wasn't good because once again, you kind of have such a high level of expectation of yourself that you should be playing every single week, and it's going to impact on your communication skills with your partner, and you get frustrated, you get angry, and it's not no one's fault. It's just because you're not where you feel you should deserve to be, and it impacts on relationships, and it was impacting on my personal relationships as well, and especially coming at the back end of that ankle operation that I experienced. And it kind of just from there I felt like I had to really start integrating my emotional intelligence into, okay, what does this actually mean now? Because I started experiencing things such as isolation, didn't want to be around people, didn't really want to go out and hang out with teammates anymore. I just wanted to stay in bed most mornings. I didn't want to get off to training. And for someone who, perceivingly on the outside looking in, people looking at my life were saying things like, well, what have you got to be so upset about? You got the world at your feet. You're playing AFL football. You got good money. I just signed a contract for 2 years, so I had good people around me, friends and family, but I still couldn't put it together as to why can't I just get off the training? And I'd cause anger and frustration in me, and I'd be crying sitting on the end of my bed, and my poor partner at the time, she'd be trying to fix it. And, I'd be a young male specifically being very abrupt and, don't worry about it, it'll be fine, I'll get on with it, and so forth. And I'd just get off the training, and I built myself up to a point where it all just became too much over that third year of my career. And
how long did you carry on that for?
That was a good solid 12 months, and it got worse and worse and worse. At the start, I thought it was just something off the back end of that incident, but it just grew and grew to a point.
Did anyone notice?
Apart
from your girlfriend?
No, my mum had known a little bit, because on the way to training, I'd actually have anxiety attacks because I'd build myself up to such levels of unsurety around my emotions. I'd be crying, right? And then I have to jump in a car and then with my training gear and head off to train. So from my house to the football club, I'd have these stories going through my head that, you're soft, you're weak, what's going on, why you're feeling this way. And I'd have anxiety attacks where I couldn't hold the steering wheel in my car. So I'd be on the side of the road, and I'd have my phone out, and I'd have mum on the phone, and I'd be talking to her in tears around what's going on. And so mum knew, obviously, physical effects from what I was saying and talking about, but we never pinpointed perhaps I needed to speak to someone, or, maybe it's depression or a mental health illness or anything like that. It was kind of me accepting that this is what playing elite sport is about. There's a mental aptitude you've got to commit to, that you've got to be resilient mentally.
So you were saying to yourself, toughen up.
Harden up, toughen up. This is just, it'll pass, you'll be fine. And then it just kind of, I'd go through days and periods. I think, good, I'm on top of this. I'm really, really good. And then, I just go through troughs where I'd just be completely depressed and at home on the couch and not wanting to do anything or see anyone or talk to anyone. Wouldn't answer messages, phone calls or anything like that. And it got to a point later in that year, and I quit AFL footy. I had a bad game of VFL game one day, and it was never the game of football. It was just a moment where everything just all come together, and I just exploded, and I quit after the one game. I called the football club, and I spoke to the general manager at the time, and I couldn't do it anymore. So I went home to the farm and sat around the table with mum and dad and Rod Ashman, who's an ex-Carlton champion, and for the first time I had to talk about it more openly as to where I was at and what I was going through. And my father, who is a really an iconic figure in football, especially in everyone I meet who knows him, he's an old school country kind of guy himself, and talking about emotions and feelings growing up just wasn't normal. So my biggest fear at that point in time wasn't the fact of what I was experiencing, more so than what it was my father judging me where I'm soft, or thinking that I'm weak. And to my surprise, in that moment when I started just drip feeding what I was going through verbally, my mum and dad were obviously very supportive and encouraged me to open up more. And I remember sitting around that table, just all of us being in tears, just trying to just come to terms with where we were at and what's going on. And more so because mum and dad love and care for me, so they didn't want to see me how I was. And Roddy Ashman, I think off the back of that, was encouraged to go back to the club and sat down with a doctor and went through some series of different testing and so forth. And that's where, I was diagnosed with depression off the back of that. And which was good because I had a title, so I knew where I was at. I knew kind of the first time in my life I'd heard the word depression being associated with what I was experiencing symptomatically. And I had a title. So every time I was experiencing anything from then on, I could say to myself, "Radio, that's depression." Yeah. I had it there in front of me. So it was manageable mentally to a point, but I was given antidepressants were obviously to help balance out the chemical challenge that it can experience at times. And I, as a young man, being naive and ignorant to the fact of medication and just depression full stop, and I just thought it was a load of crap. I thought it was just, these tablets are just placebos, and I just need to harden up. I just got to get on. I got to get on with it because the tablets weren't helping. I'd go through periods, I'd feel okay, and then, I'd drop off and just thought, it's not really doing what they need, what I was told that they would do. So I thought, bugger it. I'm just going to get on with it. And stopped taking the medication, and I abused the doctor's advice around other certain areas, and I just got on with playing footy because that's the one thing that I loved, and it's the one thing that actually helped me feel okay. Because when I was training and playing, I wasn't worried about my life because I was worried about the football.
Yes.
I could control that. And when I had that stability of thought for 8 hours a week, I was really, really calm and really, really, really good. But the minute I'd leave the club or after a game, it would just
Which
get worse.
Which club were you
worse.
with at this stage?
I was at Carlton still.
You're still at Carlton.
So this is the final year of my career. And I was just going through moments where once I was away from the club, I'd just be really, really down and really bad. And unfortunately for me, look, depression wasn't the cause of my career coming to an end. It certainly affected things like preparation and motivation and so forth, but it's not the reason why my career had come to an end. And I don't blame my mental health illness for that being the case, but I lacked a lot of responsibility. As a young male, I allowed it to consume who I was and abused the support that was there. And the resources
in what way?
Well, I had, there's doctors there, and I had people at the club that I could speak to, and I had my friends and my family who I completely didn't engage with in the conversation. I didn't want them to worry about me. I didn't need mum and dad to be concerned about me any more than what they already were. So I thought that I could just get on with this knowing that I've got depression and just move on with my life. And I didn't want friends and that to be a part of that conversation. So I look back now and think...
Was that associated with guilt and shame in any way?
Big part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, massive part of it. I just been diagnosed, and I actually ended up resenting football a lot, especially the last couple months of my career, because I felt like... And this is the victimized mindset I was in. I felt like football had given me depression.
Yeah.
I felt like that, why me, poor me, this is not fair. And I just thought that the easiest thing for me to do right now, the football club actually offered me another 1-year contract. And I actually thought, I need to get out of here.
Were they fully aware of your...
I don't think high up they were. I certainly down at kind of obviously doctor's level and so forth, they were. But I'm not aware of the extent of the conversation, how high it got at the club. But I certainly know that the club were doing what they could do to support where I was at. But certainly, 4 years into an AFL career, not knowing where you're at and kind of unsure of the stability of your career and your dream job, for the next couple of years, I was surprised that they actually gave me another year contract. But I already had made my mind up that the quick fix here is to go and do something else. The quick fix here is to get away from the Carlton Football Club and try and get an opportunity somewhere else. Because one thing I know now, people who experience depression and mental health, we can often jump to new environments, such as a new career or a new relationship or something shiny and bubbly that makes ourselves feel better for a period of time, but sustainably it's not a solution long term. And I thought getting to a new football club with a new environment, with a new motivation would inspire me to grow out of that. And perhaps I could leave all that behind and start again. And had an opportunity at the Western Bulldogs where 3 of my family members before me all played over 100 games of footy, and I thought, how good's this? This is great. I've finally felt like I was at home, being the family alignment with the club, and things just didn't quite work out the way that I anticipated it to become. I had conversations with the club, and I was pretty confident that I was going to get drafted by the Bulldogs, and it didn't quite turn out that way. I remember come draft day, I was sitting on Clarendon Street in South Melbourne, and I didn't even listen to the draft because I'd kind of been told that I was going to play there. And my phone had rang, it was Mum, and I answered expecting her to kind of be, well done, congratulations. But it was the complete opposite. It was kind of like, well, what happened? I'm like, well, what are you talking about? She's like, well, your name hasn't been called out. And I'm like, oh, okay. Surely something wrong here, or, something, there's a mistake in that. And I just remember it just hit me like a ton of bricks. It's just like, I'm done.
Yeah.
Like my career's literally over. And it really affected me, quite a lot. Because as soon as I hung that phone up from Mum, I remember saying to someone I was with at the time, wow, what value do I have now to people? Because everything, this is what the community, people in the community forget to kind of understand with us as athletes, especially footballers and that, who spend a short time in the industry. For so long, I had conversations with everyone in my life was around football. How much can you bench press? What's your diet like? How often do you train? It was never about how you're feeling or, what else do you do or your hobbies or anything like that. It was always about footy.
Well, it's your complete identity, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
In every respect.
So the minute I felt that football had been taken off, that jumper, I was no one. And you compile that with the family name and the expectation that I felt, not necessarily the expectational
that they felt.
But more the fact that I felt like I let family down, my great-grandfather, my grandfather, my dad.
But it's also the lineage as well. You've broken it.
Correct, that's it. So I managed to play 5 AFL games in my career, and everyone before me all played well over 100 AFL games. And the level of achievement for me was 100 games. If I had played 100 games of AFL footy, I would have walked away content. 101 games, I would have walked away, I think, very happy. But the fact that I felt like I failed everyone, that compiled to me really using that moment in my life as a way to just get away and just remove myself from family and friends and go try and figure this out, try and find myself again.
Yes.
Because I didn't have any education behind me. I didn't study during my footy career as much as we were told to do so. I had nothing to fall back on. And so what I did was that I kind of spent time in limbo just trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I went out and partied quite heavily and, I'd always thought that I could just wouldn't be a problem. I'd be able to just stop drinking so much and find a job and everything would be fine. And I really lacked, one thing I probably took for granted a lot is the structure and the routine. Because as a footballer, you're given a time schedule month by month at a time. So you know where to be, what to do, how to think. And for the first time in my life, I'm thinking, where do I go? What do I do? I don't need to be up at a certain time, so I can stay in bed all day if I wanted to, or I got no responsibility to be somewhere. So I lost that structure and routine, which is something robotically as an athlete you require so much. So I had to start creating my own. Didn't know where to start. So that was kind of in and out for a couple of years of what I was doing, and went back and played country footy because I was getting paid to do it, so it kept me afloat financially, and things were going okay, but more the partying and the drinking became a bigger part of who I was at that time.
Yep. Yeah. And the kinds of people I guess you're associating with.
You do, yeah. You certainly come across networks and
environments. Not to be judgmental about other people, but quite often when you've isolated yourself so much from people, you're less likely to go and form deeper relationships as well. And
even trying to hold on to relationships full stop is extremely challenging because a catalyst or triggers in my life, you look in the history of where I've kind of fallen into challenges myself. Relationships have been a big part of that. So when relationships have broken down, it's really triggered me off into other illnesses. And I've been able to now identify with that and build better people around me and better relationships. Hence, my fiance and my family and my mateships and things like that. But when you're so young going through that, trying to find yourself, pinning down a partner, for example, was almost impossible because my lifestyle just wasn't supporting the fact that I need to be supporting that aspect of who I was. So, and in 2011, I played a year at Port Melbourne Football Club and was arguably my best career in terms of football, best year of footy. We won the premiership that year, went through the whole year undefeated, and it's a really interesting time in my life because I was playing footy and enjoying it, and the mates that I had at that club were fantastic. But I remember at times after training on a Thursday night because I was still going through bad depression and mental health, and alcohol became a regular thing even during the week. And I remember sitting on in the club rooms at training, and Gary Ayres was the coach at the time, and he's someone who I tremendously respect and admire, even more so today for the work that he's done. But I remember him and I sitting, just him and I, no one else around after everyone had gone home, just talking about life and where things were at. The very first time I'd ever had a coach at that level kind of care about you as a person, and it's a bit of a shock to me. I didn't kind of know how to take it, and he certainly supported me individually through that year, through a few things, and I was so stressed about week in, week out playing football. Like, it was ridiculous. And even though I'd had an AFL background and had all the skill set and I was highly regarded by the coaching staff, but I was so stressed about whether I'd get a game every week because I just didn't know where I was at as a person, let alone playing games of footy. And I remember Gary sat me down on numerous occasions, just basically calming me down, just saying to me, mate, you know, you're loved around here. You know, you're going to play every week. You know, don't worry about it. But I just remember just becoming so overwhelmed with my performances that it was just crept into a lot of areas in my life. So lucky enough that year to be a part of a premiership team, and something I'm very, very proud of and very grateful for. And post that event, I look back now and I probably wish I would have stayed involved with the VFL system and kept playing at the Port Melbourne Football Club because of the people involved in it.
Why did you leave?
Oh, look, it was more of a passion thing. I think I went back to play VFL because I wanted to win a premiership, and I didn't think we'll do what we did in the first year. And I think that fire in me kind of went out. Yeah. But, I mean, the honest answer behind that would probably be financially I was struggling a lot. And I'd been offered some pretty good money to go play local footy again. And it's something that at that time I had to make a decision that that's what I needed to do for me then. When looking back now, you know, it was the wrong thing to do based on where I was at. And
how old were you at this stage?
I was 23,
yeah,
23, 24, yeah. So still feel very young and still finding my feet as to what I had no idea what I was doing at the time. So I went back to local football, and my local football club's a Daly Football Club in the Ballarat Football League, and you know, you couldn't ask for a better community club, fantastic people, and I just used that as a way to kind of stay involved in footy, and you know, the money was good financially to play there, kept me afloat, but it wasn't everything. But I guess that's for me where I kind of got allowed the depression. It just really kicked in over probably a 3 year period. From then on. Yeah.
And what was that critical moment where, you know, I imagine, was it scarier to be alive or scarier to think about dying?
Oh, well, that's a great question. I haven't been asked that one before, Ray. It's, for me at that time, there were moments when I can remember specifically home on my bed in a fetal position, you know, drunk, drugs in the system. Just remember feeling I do not want to be here. So the fear of being alive was far more outweighing the fact that I actually am alive. And there were moments and moments of times and these hundreds of times when I thought about it and thought, you know, how and when and why, and those positions. There was physical. I remember them being physical pain.
Yes.
In the chest, lying on my bed and just crying, and eventually I just fall asleep. And I'd wake up the next day and just kind of, you know, get on with it. And
still here,
and it's just another day and off we go and do it all again. And my footy career was obviously playing local footy, and I still had that structure a little bit there, and I still hadn't found myself as a person. And, you know, I used alcohol once again, and this is where I guess drugs became more of a recreational use in my lifestyle, and started using far too often, too frequently. As you mentioned before, the environments that brings you in are people involved in crime and so forth. And I found myself at times, you'd party for 2 or 3 days in a row, and you just, you don't know who you are. You lose complete identity. I'd stop speaking to close friends.
Were you still in contact with your family?
Family was in and out. I stopped going to birthdays, Christmases. I just didn't want to be around any formal engagements with family. I still speak to mum ongoing, but I kind of probably lost all bridge communication with my father, my brothers, and it was easier for me to deal with it by myself and just create new networks and people because that was fun. I was enjoying that. But away from all that, It
was a fairly synthetic environment, you know.
Massively,
But also that critical moment that you describe in the media quite a lot, when you're in the bathroom, you're laying on the floor and, you know, it's time to go, and then your dad called.
Yeah. Yeah, it's certainly a moment in time that sticks with me every single night. It's very hard for me to remove the memories that I have. And I remember I came home on a Thursday night, and I'd been out for about 2-3 days straight, and a partner, a female I just started seeing, she'd actually left me as I walked in. She walked out, and like passing ships in the night. And everything at that moment in my life, at that pinpoint time, it all just come together where I was broke. I stopped talking to family. I lost that connectedness and purpose. I didn't have a job. I was partying and using drugs way too often, and I was becoming reliant on them to function. And I just thought, you know what, this thing you call life, I suck at it. You know, I've let people down. I've failed in just about everything that I've done, and I knew I needed help. I knew that my best mate come to me on 2 occasions and tried to get me to admit that I needed help, and I lied to him on 2 occasions. I manipulated my way through every conversation to make people think that I was okay and walk away feeling that I had my life together, which I just never did. And I just went out and I partied for 4 days straight on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday night, and I come home that Monday morning and my housemate wasn't home. And I remember being in my bathroom, and for the first time I looked myself in the mirror, and I can remember my eyes just being really just black. I was really ruggedy, and I lack of sleep, and I was so tired. And I remember the first time, however, I felt like I had a plan, and as conflicting as it may sound, it actually sat quite well with me. Like I for so long I didn't know who I was or where I was going, but in that moment I felt like this is good.
Almost had a purpose.
Yeah, this is okay. I actually remember feeling quite content with the decision I was about to make, because the thoughts of family would come into my mind, and that fear of that perhaps turns people away and keeps them with us. And I remember thinking, it's good for them too. Like, they don't need to worry about me anymore. And my friends and family would call me weekly and send messages and that to see if I'm okay. And every time they send a message through, I just think to myself, I'm a burden on everyone. Like, just no point. So I remember thinking, this is good for everyone as well. And there wasn't anything I felt that would come into my mind at that point in time that would talk me out of where I was at. So I made a decision that suicide was the right one. And I remember specifically using a hairdryer cord to try and take my own life in my bathroom. And as I kind of pulled my weight towards the floor, as I was kind of in that position in my bathroom in front of the mirror, the hairdryer cord snapped, and that's when I fell to the floor. And it all just kind of hit you at once, and specifically remember feeling automatically straight away that you can't even do this right. Like, this isn't normal to feel this way. And right then and there is when I on the floor for about 2 or 3 minutes, just contemplating what's next and how do I effectively achieve this right now. And my phone had called, and it was in my pocket, my left hand side, and I remember reaching down my left hand and pulling it out because it was on vibration, and looking at the screen, and it had DAD on the screen, which was Dad. And my father and I, at that point, I love and respect the man, always had, and but because of where I was at, we never had a close enough relationship where he could call me and I just speak to him on the phone. So for me to answer that call then and there, even now, I'm not sure why I would. I think if I hadn't been in that position I was in, if it's just any other day, I probably would have ignored it and not answered it, and maybe spoke to him 3, 4, 5 days later, and I wouldn't have thought anything of it. But I answered the call, and straight away I just broke down, and I was just in hysterics, crying. And I didn't know this until after the fact, but my mum had actually called me about 40 minutes before I attempted my life, because I was on the phone. I spoke to Mum, and Mum was really worried about me being a Monday morning, and she just had a female intuition that us men probably take for granted. And yeah, she called me, and apparently I said to Mum, I don't remember this, but just saying, look, I'm fine, I'm okay, I'm going to be okay, and I just had a late night, and I'm just going to get some sleep now, and I'll speak to you tomorrow. And Mum's like, yeah, okay, I'll speak to you tomorrow. So, Mum hung up that phone, and it sat with her for a while. Then she said to my dad, you got to call your son. Something's not right. I don't feel right. You need to call him now. And that's when Dad called me at that time and answered the phone. And yeah, off the back of that, he knew straight away something was quite bad. And so Mum and Dad came in from the farm. A friend of ours come around and picked me up from my apartment to make sure I was safe, and took me back to their apartment until Mum and Dad came in from the farm. And I just remember sitting on the couch when Mum and Dad had come up to the apartment, just being so embarrassed, like so embarrassed. I couldn't look them in the eye. I had my head down and my hands in my head in my hands, and just crying, and like hysterically crying and just shaking. And I couldn't possibly look at Mum and Dad, and they were hugging me and just really obviously happy that I'm still here. And off the back of that, went back home to the farm, and the next day went into an office of a psychologist, Dr. Maddie Clements, who I'd been working with during my AFL career. I've spoken to her a couple of times, and I sat with her in her office. I went in there by myself, and just had a conversation with her. And I think when it really hit me around getting help was sitting in her office when I was hunched over, and I was still crying. I was still coming to terms with what I had tried to do and where I was at. And she got a mobile phone out and she put on loudspeaker, and she called Mum, and she said, look, I'm with Jake now. Before I send him home to the farm again to spend time with you guys, before we can get him off into a program, I need to make sure that he doesn't have any access to any firearms, so Jake can't come home and shoot himself. And in that moment, I just remember hearing just silence for about 20 seconds, and in a lump in Mum's throat, I can hear it, and it just hit me like a knife in the heart. And I just going, wow, like I need help, like I need to get help, because the first time I'd kind of known the impact perhaps on people in family, but for the first time I could physically hear it. And it just hit me really, really hard that, Jake, now's the time, go and get some help. Because you're starting to affect people now that are close to you, family have stood by you through all of this. I'm really grateful for Mum and Dad, and obviously family and friends, and Dr. Clements as well, who helped out through that period. And I was referred off to see a psychiatrist, Dr. Brendan Murphy, in St. John of God in Dandenong, and spent time working in a program with him, and just had the chance to rebuild myself as a man. And Mum and Dad funded that program, and learnt mental health, and learnt drugs and alcohol and the effects that it can have on people, and more so myself, and why I was using and stuff. But the bottom lining of it all come back to depression, mental health, the illness that I was diagnosed with, and becoming responsible for that, and identifying that it's so manageable. There's things that you can do for yourself that you can actually support such a diagnosis. And once I kind of bought into it, it became quite easy for me to transition into a life of fulfillment and mindfulness and sustainability, and it just became a part of who I was. And I accepted the fact that it's going to be a part of me forever, not something I thought that would just go away at some point. And once I did that and I bought into that concept, it became a lot easier.
Learning to live with what you have.
Exactly,
Yes.
yeah. And I did. I learned to live with it. I had a relapse at one point, only about 3 or 4 months into it.
Yes.
And through that as well, helped me realise that I'm human again. And it made me realise that I need to stop my crap, my bullshit, and I need to not think that I'm a footballer again, and I'm bulletproof, and I'm Superman. And so that brought me to down to earth again. And off the back of that, ever since, it's been a journey, but it's been one that certainly I'm very grateful for.
How many years ago was the last relapse that you had?
Yeah, so I'm 30 years of age now, so just over 5 years now ago now. Yeah,
Now, Jake, you may not realise this, but we have hurtled through just about the entire show.
Have we? Oh, there you go.
Yeah, we've still got
Apologise.
Oh, please don't. I could have intervened at any time,
Yep.
But it was not necessary because the story in itself is just so incredibly powerful. I think this is probably the least speaking I've ever done on my show in all the years I've been doing this show. So, but, I think what you've described is probably what so many people experience as well, in terms of all the things that, the challenges that we have in our lives, the masking that we do, protecting others, feeling enormous amounts of guilt and shame that we haven't managed everyone else's expectations, let alone our own, and then, behaviours that look and sound like failure. But I know we're fast forwarding a little bit now, but what you have developed and what you've managed to create in Outside the Locker Room, being this amazing program, using all of that experience and what you've described, that's years of every single day.
Yeah.
Feeling, experiencing, managing, getting up and falling down. So what you're delivering is something pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is. It's something I look probably at now I'm extremely proud of.
Was there a point in time when you go, this is what I'm going to do?
Yeah, there was. There was certainly a point in time. I mentioned with my background being football, I always talk about, people ask me, how'd you set it up and, what did you do and so forth. And I'm like you lot in a lot of ways, Ray. I don't have education behind business, admin or anything like that. I had no idea where I was going, what I was doing. And the first couple of years I was just going along with it, really. And it just kind of grew generically because of the need for it, which was a direct impact of the work that we're doing. But I remember specifically, football for me had given me a blueprint. I speak about this blueprint being for people to understand. For many years, I learnt hard work, dedication, commitment, and I know that just better than most people because of my football years and the competitiveness of it. And once I took that, my psychiatrist taught me this actually. My mindset, my blueprint as an individual is very powerful. So once I kind of, in my life, if you use examples such as depression, drugs, alcohol, every time I was focused on something, it would just grow and it would encapsulate who I was as a person. So once he fine-tuned my thinking around that and helped me identify with that's a strength of mine, we put it into the thought of Outside the Locker Room off the back of one day sitting at a cafe trying to come up with a name of it. And through that process, once I identified, Outside the Locker Room, that makes sense, that's a good name. Off the back of that, it just, once my focus was on it, my passion, my commitment, my purpose, it just grew and grew and grew and manifested into what it is today, 4 years later. And really looking back now, it's, for what we have achieved in less than 4 years is quite remarkable, given the fact that, once again, it's off the back of a story. And as the generic growth of it has shown, that I'm not the only one who's going through tough times, and my story has been certainly a catalyst to help spread the message. But there's two reasons why I started. The first one was a legacy. I needed it to become something bigger than Jake Edwards. I needed it to become something more than just my story. So it needed to be scalable. It needed to have the ability for people anywhere and everywhere to utilize, and that is bigger than me. And that was really important to me. So one day in 10, 20 years, I can look back at my kids and I can say to them, hey, your dad did that. That's something that I can be proud of.
Didn't play 101 AFL games, but he did probably attend 101.
Correct, absolutely. And that to me is far more important lesson to my children one day than it would be playing football. And that legacy for me was key. The second one was that I didn't want to just be an awareness program. I didn't want to just go around and share my story just for the hell of talking about my journey. In fact, I would trade in my story to ensure that people don't go through what I'd gone through in a heartbeat. Talking my story is irrelevant and means nothing if there's nothing behind it from a resource point of view to support people, to connect them, to make them feel that there's someone there they can get some help for.
But also relatable as well. I think that's the key to it, especially, and I know that you work with females and males, but typically in the sporting clubs that you're attending, there is a large contingent of boys. And when you describe those things like boys need a purpose, boys need an objective, and that aimless part of being a boy is that very dangerous time. And you've got this opportunity that you've created where you can intervene. And intervention is probably one of the most critical things we have in that moment before something happening, like when your dad phoned you.
Yep.
That moment in time.
Yep.
That changed everything.
There is, and I think we look at elite sport as the pinnacle of individual achievement when it comes to AFL, for example, and they set the standard in welfare and resources and support. What we want to see as part of our foundation is that, could you imagine if every local community sporting club in Australia had access to a program like ours? I mean, it would change people's lives. And what evidence that we support through our program, what we collect, it's doing that.
Yes.
And the elite platforms have that. So why can't grassroots community have the same access to it, where we can intervene, we can come in and we can share stories, but more importantly, we can offer education and we can actually tap people into getting help earlier rather than an illness stage.
Well, there seems to be quite a few, not like yours, but like you've got Lance Piccioni, Love You, Love Me.
Yep.
Does similar work. You know, Lance also lives with a mental health condition and has done for most of his life. We've got David Burt and SALT, which again is another program that's kind of different to yours. But, you know, but there's so many sporting clubs just in Australia alone. It's almost a non-competitive space, isn't it?
It really is. In Victoria alone, you got just, I think it's just under 1,300 football clubs. Yes. That's just football. Women's sport is the largest growing, AFL is the largest growing sport in Australia. So there's a lot of, there's a big market out there.
Oh, yes.
And there's a lot of communities who
women's
need help.
Issues are very different from men's issues, especially when you're at a football club on top of that.
They are, yes.
Now, I was just going to mention as well, because we have been talking about some pretty, do you know what I was thinking? I was going to say intense, but
Heavy?
I don't know. No, I think it's such a privilege to listen to what it feels like being someone else, and that's always the perspective that I come from. It's not about what you've got, what you're doing about it, and what you're taking to get better. It's more about what does it feel like being you today. And you've kind of told your story, but in essence also given a bit of an insight to what it feels like being you today, because I watched your face all the way through and how it changed with every experience that you described. I'm feeling a little bit emotional, by the way. I'm going to start crying in a moment, but that's all right. But for people who are listening in who may be experiencing some feelings and emotions that they didn't expect, don't forget you can phone Lifeline, which is 131114. Suicide callback service is amazing. You know, there's so many legs to that organisation for support. Their number is 1300 659 467. And, of course, emergency services, 000. Don't hesitate. It's there for a reason. So up next we have the divine Ken Lyons. He hasn't stuck his head in yet. He usually does, because we normally have a song break. And we did have a song break all planned today. A band that you told me about, they're from Gympie.
They are from Gympie, up north, Queensland,
North. Yeah. And they're, the name of the band is...
The Amity Affliction.
That's it. Now, do you know how they have their name?
I do. Do you want to guess?
Well, I did my research, Jake.
Go on.
One of their friends at 17 died in a car accident. And they were in their year 12 year at the end of high school when they'd formed the band, and had a lot of trouble reconciling their feelings around the death of their friend. Yep. Which is how it came about.
It is. I think music is another amazing platform a lot of people communicate through. And knowing Joel, the singer, really well, and Aaron especially, the other singer, they utilise this platform as a way to bring another new connectedness to mental health.
Yes.
And their work is tremendous in this space.
Yeah, no, I mean, you said to me the other day, I don't think your listeners will really like my type of music, but I think any new experience we get to have, and unfortunately we don't have time to play it, but we didn't even get across half of what I wanted to get across today. Will you come back?
Yeah, I'm happy to come back, absolutely. I think it's important to have a follow-up.
Yes.
Come back and share more.
Well, I'm actually heading off. This is my last show now until I think about the 28th of August or 29th of August. So I'm heading off to Tuscany, Sorrento, Assisi and the UK for about 4 weeks. And during that time, I'm using that to do a lot of reflection on the work that I do as well.
Yep.
Around how to deliver more and different, programs for people that really does work towards helping making that critical change around stigma, most importantly, because I still feel that stigma is one of the biggest killers of people in the mental health space, because we're not recognising that it actually is okay to be not okay.
That's right. Well, have fun on your holiday.
I will, Jake.
Thank you very much for having me. And if the listeners want to learn more about the program, they can just jump on our website, just on outsidelockerroom.com.au or our Facebook page.
You know what? You can even just type in Jake Edwards.
It'll come up.
Outside the Locker Room, and everything will come up, and a whole bunch of media as well. So just remember, it is okay to not be okay. And don't forget, just ask somebody, what does it feel like being you today? See you later, everyone. Well, I'm not going to say see you later at all, but I am going to now. Bye-bye.
Opinions expressed on 94.13 WBC are those of presenters and guests. But as a member of the Community Broadcasting